Greg, I'm so happy to have you here
Yeah,
today.
thanks for having me.
This is super, super exciting. Josh told me about you and the work that you're doing, and I looked you up, and I say, yeah, absolutely great, fantastic guy. And it was just really cool because you're really talking about how you love to put people first in all the work that you do. And we're going to get into all of that because I think it's really, really fascinating, really, really cool. But to start off, as I always ask, can you just maybe describe a little bit about who you are and just let our audience know, who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. So my name's Greg Dobson. I work for Humankind Global Recruitment. We're based in Manchester. I do business development here in Halifax, look after Canada, and eventually, diving into Latin America as well. I consider myself to be a connector, someone who has a passion for marketing, building relationships, and really just getting to know people and finding ways to help them out.
Yeah, that's cool. Latin America. See, I didn't know that. And
yeah.
Have you been there?
I've not. It's, if my bosses are listening, I'd love to go someday.
Yeah. If you want anybody down there, I'll volunteer.
Yeah.
I've never been there either, but everyone that goes there says it's amazing. It's just beautiful weather, beautiful people as well too.
Yes.
So anyways, so I did notice that on your profile, one of your first jobs was working at Red Bull. Was it sales reps or like promoting?
Yeah, it was sales reps. So basically what I did was in summer, between university years, we had like a Dodge Sprinter truck. You would load up your product and you'd have different territories, locally and across Nova Scotia that you'd look after. But then I'd also be up in New Brunswick as well and PEI. So it really got me on the road, and, you meet with anyone from a local, convenience store owner to, all the different bars and restaurants that would carry the product to, large, corporate chains, whether they be grocery stores or gas stations, and, was on the road a lot, listening to music and, meeting people. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, that must have been a blast. So, because Red Bull is always associated with like those extreme sports or just any kind of sports. Like, were you involved in like setting up parties and stuff like that with kids, or? So no, like there was like student brand ambassadors that would sort of organize some events here. And like we would have like industry events with the bar staff as sort of industry. So you'd have like DJ competitions and that sort of thing locally. But the best thing that I was able to do was I won a sales competition. I got to go up to Ottawa, and they had this thing called Flugtag. And it's in the middle of Flugtag. I think it's like Flugtag. Okay. And it's in the middle of the canal. And you'd have this giant platform, and people would build these aircrafts, and they would basically run off the end of the ramp and see how far they got. Most of them would just go right down,
I've
splash.
seen those on YouTube,
and you'd have a great time. And I had some of the best times there. I had a lot of fun. You got to sort of meet people from all different places, but I think that brought some of the sort of competitive spirit in terms of sales in me when I was younger, because, I was competing with people nationally, and only so many people got to go to this thing. And it was a lot of fun. And as a brand, they're a company that treats people well, but also love to have a lot of fun as well. Yeah, no kidding. And I wanted to bring it back to this whole idea of working with people. Like in this role, you're like you said, you're talking with lots of people all the time. Is it something that you've always had a passion for, or did you kind of find that passion through doing this job and just talking to people, being like, this is really cool? I'll give a shout out to Sean Meister, LinkedIn's Nova Scotia guy here. He spoke, I think, on one of your recent episodes about sort of the Nova Scotia experience and, being a talker. In my family, we would say that we were gum flappers. Always loved to chat with people. As a kid, we would stay every sort of New Year's Eve. We would stay down at a hotel for the night. Go swimming in the pool, and it was like the greatest thing ever as a kid. Love swimming, still do to this day. I'm like a giant child when it comes to that. But you would stick me in a pool, and I would leave the pool with like 3 new best friends. And so awesome. I was always the type to want to spark up a conversation with people. And in my role at Red Bull, it helped a lot because I was meeting with people from all different backgrounds. In northern New Brunswick, you'd have folks that only spoke French and wouldn't speak English. And I had to draw on some of my like junior high French immersion, to get by. And it was one of those things where you build relationships with people. You're selling a product. Sometimes they don't want it, but the sales figures were there, and you would have to talk about sort of where you'd want to put it, how you'd want to place it. You'd have competitors that you'd be going up against, and sometimes you'd say, is there any way that you can help me with a display, and that would help me get my numbers up, and I will help on something down the road. And you'd sort of work on that, like negotiating, and looking back on it, I didn't realize that's what I was sort of like the skills that I was working on, but was definitely something that played a big role into sort of building that foundation for, relationship building and sales.
And then you decided to go to school to study marketing. Did that stem from that as well too, or?
I've always had a love for marketing, love branding. Like I love logo design. I'm such a big nerd when it comes to that. I have like logo design books. There'd be like, newsletters that I would read about, okay, this company updated their branding. What did they change and why? And just something that I always enjoyed. And then, was a big fan of Mad Men. And so once I went into school, I was like, I'm definitely going to work for an agency and, pitch all these really cool like concepts and ideas, not quite understanding that, the BD and sort of relationship management side is one thing, but like the actual creative side would be something where you go to like a NASCAD to develop those skills. So just was sort of fascinated with the industry and being able to sort of tap into brand perception and find ways to put products or services in front of people. And, it led into that sort of sales piece as well. It's just like, how can I make a difference through marketing? And it was a lot of fun. Got to start up the Mu Marketing Society while I was there with some other classmates, and had a blast, just talking about branding and, case studies and having some like different like events and stuff like that. So it got us all excited for it, and was a lot of fun.
That's one thing that I like about universities when you're studying. If it can connect you with like-minded folks that have similar interests, and you can kind of get together and kind of what you're saying at Red Bull, you learn these skills that can go with you throughout the rest of your life, but you don't even like know you're learning those skills, which is, I think, I don't know, it's
really kind of cool because it, you have the time to reflect as you get older, and you're like, oh wow, like maybe I didn't realize that had much more of an impact on me than it did, or that was more influential of a time with what I do now, or some of the processes that I do, or my approach to certain things. So I thought it was kind of neat to be able to look back at it now and say, oh, there's some things that I probably picked up from an early age and in a completely different, business that I'm still kind of tapping into today.
That makes perfect sense. I know for me, I went to university and studied biology, and then I got my master's degree in biology, and I do nothing that's associated with biology at all whatsoever. And sometimes I catch myself saying like, I wish I didn't go to university at all because I just wasted my time. But in hindsight, when I look back, it's like, you know what? I actually did learn some skills that I still apply to this day in my business, in terms of how to do proper research and how to understand data and just do all kinds of different analyses that you just learn through university. That
I saw that thesis that you wrote. It's
super
detailed, and in the process of sort of setting this up, I was like, wow, this is someone who is really on top of their stuff. All the little details, the organization comes through, and you can just see how that has been built up over time. So, I will say I read a lot of the written part, but as soon as you got into the stats and all of the different sort of measurements of runoff, I was like, I'm lost. But
I think I tuned out too when I was writing that, because it does get into those minute details, and it's kind of like, that's not really, it's almost like the conclusions that you can get out of it. Like you read the abstract and you read kind of what can come from it, is that's kind of the important stuff. Everything else is just kind of the details of, does the science make any sense, and can people reproduce it, all that kind of boring technical stuff. So I did want to get into this point of you being at university and you're studying, and something like absolutely terrible and unimaginable happened. Is you were 19 years old, and your younger brother, 16 years old, he just died suddenly when he was just at practice at the Q playing hockey. I can't even imagine what that experience is like. Can you maybe just talk real quick about like what was that like?
The day was. It's funny. Time has such an interesting way of presenting itself. Sometimes things can feel so far away, but also your memories can be very vivid on certain things, and a little fuzzier on others. And I can remember that day specifically. I was working for Red Bull at the time. I was down in Antigonish. I just finished lunch, and I got the call from my parents. And you could just tell something was off as soon as I picked up the phone. When they described what happened and that he was gone, they were still having to deal with things because they were there in person, when he had collapsed on the ice, and they were still sort of going to see, okay, well, what happens next, and also the shock going on with them at the same time. And it just so happened that sort of one of my colleagues' friends happened to be in Antigonish at the time and saw me. I was sort of outside of my car, and I wasn't sure what to do. Just the hospitality that people gave me in driving me home that day. And, that was a time where you were getting a lot of information show up, on the news and Twitter while, I was still trying to get a hold of my siblings to notify them of what had happened. And, my sister was just starting a new job. She was in Toronto for training and coming back. And, I caught her just moments before she got into a meeting versus, her finding out afterwards. And it's something that kind of just like it shook us all because it was so unexpected. We had no known, family heart history. And then came to find out through a lot of testing after the fact that there was something there. And, so many other visits that we had where we found, okay, well, this is something that runs in the family. And, my mom was affected by it and had to go through surgery. I had a separate condition unrelated where I had to go through surgery when I was in university shortly after that happened, and was sort of dealing with some fear of, okay, does this mean something could happen to me next? And, how do we honestly, how do we sort of cope with this and find ways to, remember Jordan and do that in a way that, would be respectful to him. And it was just this blur. It was in the summer right before starting, final year of university. And it was crazy to just think of just how quick things just shifted and changed, for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm. And then you end up finding, like, you had to do all these tests to figure out that it was some kind of genetic component. But you said for you, then you had to do some testing and they found something with you, but it had nothing to do.
Completely separate.
Really?
So, my brother had, and it's a mouthful, it's called arrhythmogenic right ventricle cardiomyopathy, which is ARVC. It's actually very well known in the Atlantic provinces as something that exists, here and in Newfoundland. It's very prominent. It's something where there's no cure for it. Essentially, you have scar tissue that sort of builds up and sort of closes up, your right ventricle over time. Okay. And before you have any symptoms, the one symptom that happens is, experience like that where it could be, fatal. I had experienced some chest pains when the frozen yogurt sort of thing was a big thing here. My sister and I went out and just something didn't like feel very right, and it felt like someone was trying to like punch their way out of my chest.
Oh, wow.
And it just didn't feel right for me. So I had my parents, they sort of put a blood pressure checker on me, and they were like, "This doesn't seem right," and went into Cobequid. And I could tell very quickly by how serious they were that they said, okay, like, you're not going home tonight. We need to get you in. And over sort of 2 surgeries that spanned 17 hours, I had what was called a catheter ablation. And the thing that I had was called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. Essentially, your electrical circuits run around in your heart at a certain rate, but mine essentially were just going way too fast at a resting heart rate. I think my resting heart rate was like close to 200 beats per minute. And
was your resting heart rate like that all the time, or was it something that just kind of gradually?
Not that I knew of.
Oh, okay. Because I guess it would just be normal to you. Because
but this is something where I was just so much more. It just felt like so much more. And it's something that's common. There's people who have WPW and they take things like beta blockers and that sort of thing, and it just sort of manages it, and it's never an issue. This just happened to be a really rare sort of instance, and I think the surgery that happened. Dr. Chris Gray at the QE2, I'm forever thankful for him. It was the first surgery of its kind in Canada, second of its kind in the world, where they did a 3D map of my heart, and just a blend of technology, and some of the best cardiologists are actually here in Halifax. I had an opportunity to look at going to Toronto or other places, but stayed here at the QE2, and they essentially saved my life.
And this all happened within the span of a few months, eh?
Yeah. So this, the surgeries that I went through were in February. Jordan had passed in August. So this was, I was like sort of midway through the school year, and went through those and then sort of bounced right back and got back into it. So, scary times for sure, but it was something that just sort of put life in perspective to say, okay, well, why do you do what you do? And, can you sort of, it sounds cliche, but, like you're living life for yourself, but also knowing how my brother passed, what can I do to make him proud of what I'm doing as well? And how can I sort of apply that to everything that I do?
A lot of people have a hard time getting past something like that happens, something tragic. But maybe I want to talk a little bit about how you turned something, obviously that was so negative into something that's positive. So I know, because you've done some stuff for charity and raising money and raising awareness. Can you maybe talk about that? Because I just love the idea of taking something that's so negative, turning it into something that's positive, something that that your brother would be immensely proud of.
Like we were thinking around the 1 year anniversary of his passing, how are we going to celebrate his life and not have it be something that was, so negative. Like, it is something that's emotional and it's difficult, but how can we help others? Because there's going to be other people that are affected by inherited heart disease. And we knew that from, my experience going in and my mom's experience and some of our family members as well. And so we had said, well, hockey was his life, and it meant so much to him. And he was chasing his dreams, so it had to be hockey. Initially, we thought maybe like a 17-hour hockey game, because 17 was the number that he wore, and it's the number I have tattooed on my arm for him. And then I thought, I don't think I could play 17 hours of hockey.
You love hockey, but
I could get a few in, and then I'd probably be on the bench. And so, we had a few friends locally who knew some of the local NHL players. And I happened to be at it was a party, and Brad Marchand and a few of the other NHLers like Andy Bodnarchuk, who used to play with the Mooseheads, were there. And I said, listen, I want to do like a one-day event. Like, would you guys be in? And they, without even hesitation, they said, absolutely yes. Right. And we had known Brad back when we were younger. He went to high school with my sisters, and he gave Jordan a hockey stick when he was playing for the Moncton Wildcats. Like, he is a great guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say we don't like him on the ice sometimes,
but he is one of the nicest people I've ever met in terms of what he will do to support people in need. And so they said yes, and so we created a tournament. And so teams played in a tournament. We once had a team come over from Beijing, expats of Nova Scotia, come over and compete, and you would win a cup, and you would fundraise and be able to draft the NHL player of choice. We had Brad, we had James Neal, we had Nathan McKinnon was there a few times, and a bunch of other local talent. Jill Saunier from the women's Olympic team, Ben Scrivens after winning bronze. So like some really good people. And we raised, with that event, $1.2 million for the Inherited Heart Disease Clinic at the QE2 Foundation.
That's amazing.
Which was amazing. The clinic is now named after Jordan. So there's a legacy piece there that was important to make sure he wasn't forgotten. But then on top of that, through the Jordan Boyd Foundation, we've given out over 20 scholarships for kids who are going into their sort of starting their university journey, those who have exemplified leadership and have been involved in extracurriculars and sports, as well as $125,000 investment in AEDs through the Atlantic University Sport, and some of these save stations, which there's one down on the Halifax waterfront, one up in Sydney, but essentially it's an AED that lives in a cabinet down by the waterfront. If someone's going through cardiac arrest, you pull that out. AEDs are very easy to use. The instructions will sort of tell you how to do it. They're
dummy proof. Yeah,
you can save a life, and hopefully it never gets used. But hopefully, if it ever does get used, there's a positive outcome, and all of that could be tied back to some of the work that we're doing for heart research and preventative measures for.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I just absolutely love hearing that story, because that work that you've done is, like you said, has probably saved how many lives so far, and it's just really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for doing that. And let's maybe shift a little bit gears here and talk about like your work experience. So you worked a lot, I saw in your LinkedIn, as account managers. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what that was like to work with? Because I think you worked with lots of big clients there. There's names like, I have it written down here.
We had like
Cineplex, right? You're working with these big companies. Yeah. What's it like working with those companies?
It was a great experience. For me, I jumped into the agency side of things like a week before I graduated university. I started, and the first agency that I was at gave me a real opportunity to take on big clients quickly and have a leadership role, which I think is pretty rare. Oftentimes in the agency space, you start, at the bottom.
You're right at the bottom,
and, you put in your time in the trenches. And I still had to do a lot of that, but there was a trust that was there, and I had someone who took me under her wing and, was my mentor and gave me a lot of tips and pointers. And we would write RFPs in the boardroom, listen
proposals, right?
Yeah, so we would write like proposal responses, listening to Biggie, and and that was our way of sort of hyping ourselves up for winning business. And you work with big accounts like Nova Scotia Power, and some of the big ones like Toronto Symphony Orchestra was one of my favorite clients back in the day. But then some that were down in the States as well, and you learn there's different styles of dealing with clients. So some clients are very direct and to the point. A lot of the American clients, don't want to spend as much time talking about what you did on the weekend and weather and how's the family. It's let's get into tactical level things of what we need to get done. And then if there's time at the end, we can do that. So you would learn to sort of change your approach based on the type of client. Some were more, let's chat more and develop the relationship first. Others were like, let's get right into it. I have a lot of busy things on the go.
Yeah.
And you'd be able to understand, like, with a client like Nova Scotia Power, there was times where I put together an idea where I mocked something up in Photoshop, and I just said I had the confidence based on the relationship there to pitch them on something and turn it into a project. Whereas other clients, it's not as much like that because it's more of a transactional relationship. Ideally, you want to have someone that you build that trust with, and you can say, okay, we know each other. I know you. I can anticipate some of the things that you might be looking for.
Like that person that's your contact within that business.
Yeah. And like understanding where their business is going too. So listening when you're talking to them, and then taking the extra mile to say, like, tell me about what's coming up next for you guys. And not just as I can pitch you on something, but, understand how we can adjust our approach in terms of how we deliver projects or maintenance in order to sort of align with what you guys are doing. Because if you go to sync, it's easy at any time for an agency to say, or for a client to say, let's maybe look at a different agency just to shake things up. And it happens.
Right. So I think you hit the nail on the head there, in that you want to treat them not as just like a checkbook of this is how you get money, but as like actual people, and you need to anticipate what their needs are and see what they are and see that you can deliver those needs. Because if you're not going to work with them and be an actual asset to them, then why would they even
You'll
keep
see
you on?
the common thread for me in everything that we'll talk about today is relationships. Like one of my clients, I had developed a great relationship with, and she ended up being the justice of the peace when my wife and I got married. So,
right on.
Talk about a tight relationship with a client, and one that, sort of went beyond, the time that I was at an agency. We kept in touch. And I think that speaks to, the trust that someone can have in someone. There's times where, like, as an account manager, you're really sort of the point of contact between agency and, the team that's delivering those services, and, what their, strategy is. And for me, I would find that, there's times where you might get things wrong, and, your team might not be able to do things fast enough, or might not have the skill set, in all honesty, to be able to do what they're looking for. But if that relationship is solid, you can find ways to say, okay, well, how can we meet in the middle, or find ways to do some different things, or make some suggestions. And if you don't have that, it's very easy to say, well, we're frustrated because nothing's happening, and maybe we'll go with someone else.
Yeah. How much of that skill did you learn, like initially when you're dealing with Red Bull and you're dealing with sales and you're just kind of learning kind of on the fly? How much of those skills have allowed you to be able to go into these relationships with people, to be able to read them? Like you were saying, you can understand when somebody wants to chit chat or when they just want to get down to business. Yeah. That's a learned skill. That's not something that you can just have with easy. How easy did it come with you? And was it built from your previous experience?
I'd say it's something I still work on to this day. It's never something you can master, but early days, it was, find ways to sort of hone your pitch when you're like actively selling versus pitching via, active listening. And so, I went through, and this is the thing where, like, investing in training, reading different books can help. So I read this book, The Art of Selling Yourself. I thought it was great because it was a way to really sort of understand, okay, like, just selling for the sake of selling is not always going to work. And people are less receptive to that because we're so desensitized to people who sell. And so I went through Sandler training when I was at one of my agencies, and, a lot of the stuff that they would talk about, and, anyone who's sort of in the BD space or marketing space would know this, is the idea of, like, listening for pain points. So, asking the right qualifying questions, much like what you do in your interviews, and saying, okay, like, let me ask a few questions about, like, okay, you mentioned this thing's going on with your business. What happens if, like, this doesn't happen? Is there a cost to that? Like, and then being able to sort of quantify that, and then by them saying that out loud and saying, okay, well, maybe there's something that could be done there. But the fact that they're doing the chatting and you're listening and taking in that information means that you're not just saying, and I think one of the terms that people would say is, like, spilling your candy in the lobby is.
Never heard that.
I think it's a Sandler thing. And it would be like, you go into a prospect meeting and you're like, here's all my benefits and here's all the things that I can do. And I can do this and this and this and this and this. So I can do whatever for you. And then they'd say, well, you don't really know me and understand, any of my pain points or, what I actually need. So thanks for basically throwing your brochure at me, but that's not something that's an effective approach. And sometimes it works if you're selling certain products or services, but for the most part, you need to get to know someone. You need to get to know what their business needs and do that research, and then, go from there.
If you're a new entrepreneur and you don't have these budgets like these big companies have that you're working with, there still has to be an avenue for success when you're trying to think about how can I market my business, or how could I market the product that I'm having. What kind of advice could you give to those entrepreneurs that are looking to just basically, do some marketing or do some promotions of themselves, that don't have the big money, they don't have the big budgets?
Yeah, like, spending money on, marketing spend is not always the right answer. Like, there's things you can do, like, paid search and that sort of thing that people will suggest you to do, and that's great. But I do think that there is sort of that organic, ground level, get out there and network, go to events, make yourself seen, meet with people. You are an extension of the brand. So when you are talking to people, when you say I'm with X, Y, or Z brand, and you're talking to them, and how you interact with them is a reflection of that brand. That in itself is an advertisement. So how you portray yourself, how you show up to things, how you, get to know people, and, doing more of that active listening and saying, okay, well, I met you at this event, so I'm not going to necessarily pitch you at this, but, let's get to know each other. And maybe like 3 events down the road, we find that there's something there that might be worth exploring. Ask the right questions. Like, that's definitely a good way to do it. Finding things like, I would honestly say, like, relationship building is key, but I think there's like a shift that's happening, because I see a lot of people going into more like solopreneur or sort of like small businesses that are trying things out on their own, as opposed to sort of like big companies, especially in like the marketing space, or, like entrepreneurs with like 2 or 3 employees. Find folks that align with your values and see if there's ways that you can partner. Not necessarily like, here's a contract, let's partner, you throw in X amount, I throw in X amount, and we do something. I find you can have partnerships with people where you say, our values align, we have similar things, maybe we could both sort of put on some event together and we can sort of split the cost, and it can help both of us. Or ask for referrals. You meet people and you build up good relationships with them. Just because they might not be the right client for you doesn't mean that they don't know someone that would say, you know what, your message resonates. I know some people I can connect you with, and offer some up yourself. If you are willing to put a little bit out there and, be open to, sharing some contacts, or, even helping people with some advice, or not necessarily giving away work for free, but somewhere sort of in that middle, you're going to have people that say, this is someone that has shown me that I can trust them. They're a great person, and why would I not want to help someone out? There's more of that happening now. I've put on events with people where we've said, hey, like, the 3 of us all align on what we want to do. Let's combine our resources and do something together. There's not like one person's getting more than the other. We're just doing it to help each other out. And sometimes that leads to really good opportunities.
I love what you're saying there about putting yourself out there and trying to make connections with people and trying to find different ways that you can help out each other. It's something that I'm trying to do. I struggle with that, to be honest, because a lot of the times for me, I've done like computer programming, or I've had ideas for businesses, and I just like to sit down in my cubicle or in my little office and just work and just kind of work alone. How could you, like, is there anything that you can say to give advice to, even just for me or people that are like me, that really have a hard time putting themselves out there and making those connections?
Find someone who, like, you might have a friend who is that natural, outspoken, or more of that like connector, or someone that's more like extroverted that, you could sort of tag along with, and maybe you go to an event together and they make some introductions there. Sometimes it is sort of building up confidence. I found one trick one of my mentors gave me back in the day was, before you go into a pitch or you go to an event, pick a song, make it be your pump up song, play it on repeat until you get there, just over and over and over again, and get fired up. And it just puts you in this mindset, whether it's like heavy rock music or rap or whatever it may be. Pick that one song, have that get you amped up for, the event, and go in there. And what's the worst that can happen? There's a lot of people that are looking to do the same thing, and you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to just help people out because they want to just have a good conversation or share their knowledge. So it's hard to sort of get over that hump, but I do think that if you can find someone that can say like, hey, like I'm going to this event, do you want to tag along? Like you want to sort of be my, almost like my wingman type thing. Absolutely. I'm sure there's people who would do that. And don't be afraid to ask. Like I think there's a lot of people. I remember this in the marketing space. Like we would have a client and we'd have like 3 really good ideas for them, and then this 4th wildcard one, and we would never, sometimes pitch that 4th wildcard idea because we're like, oh, I don't think they'd like that. But it's like we would get in our own head. But what if that were to take off? And you never know. That could end up being an award-winning campaign, or show them that, okay, they're just picking safe ideas. Wow, they really came to, not for us right now, but love what you're doing, love the energy. Just shows, the passion that's there. So don't be afraid to ask. DM someone, shoot your shot. What happens? Never know.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Just what's the worst that can happen? And it's almost like you can use that philosophy for anything. Like if you're nervous to go ask that girl out on a date or whatever, what's the worst that could happen? She can say no, but then you're okay. You're okay, and everything's gonna be fine after that.
Absolutely.
So that's like amazing advice. I never heard about that pump up music too. That's a really good idea. Jordan Belfort. So the Wolf of Wall Street guy.
Yes. Okay.
I think I read one of his book on sales, and he was talking about, he's saying stuff like all of his horrible sales tactics. So that definitely don't listen, I don't think, to him in terms of how he sells.
Yeah.
But he had this really interesting thing where he had this like flavor shot of smell or something. And he's like, when you make a deal and you feel that euphoric high of making a deal, he's like, take a hit of that smell, like really ingest it or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're going to associate that smell with that feeling of, I just made a sale, I'm on top of the world. So like every time you go into your next meeting, just take a shot of that thing. So it brings your brain back to that state of, I don't know, pumped up of like, I just made a sale. So
it's interesting that you say that, because the music for sure, but on the smell thing, funny enough, when I was in grade 6, we had someone come in and do a presentation to us on Indigenous culture and different sort of aspects of it, and they gave us all this little braid of sweetgrass, and I kept it in this little wooden box. I still have it to this day. It's been like well over 20 years. If you open it up, it still smells amazing, just like it. Wow. Have you ever like smelled like sweetgrass? Obviously used a lot in like smudging and that sort of thing, but the smell of it is incredible, and it's very calming. In university, I would just be like, oh, I'll open this up and put it by my desk, and when I'm studying or like something like that. So it's kind of funny, like it doesn't necessarily have to be something like that. Could be a candle. Could be plug-in Febreze thing. But
I think smells have that feeling or that effect on us as well too, where it can bring back those memories or those feelings of being in that certain place or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you can find those associations, like whatever works, I guess, to make you go out and do stuff. So you mentioned about you like branding. What would you say is one of the things that people get wrong about branding or when they're thinking about building a brand?
I think it comes down to like there is brand. There's logos, but brand is so much bigger than that. And brand is everything from, your visual identity to your tone of voice online to the way that your employees represent the brand if you're out speaking in public. So every interaction that you have. So if I'm going out and speaking about what Humankind does, as I'm out talking to people about what we do or just connecting with people, that is essentially an extension of our brand voice. Just as if one of our recruiters is, talking to a candidate as well, that is the experience that you're having with that entity. So you think of a company that sells a particular product, someone gets it, it's in the wrong size, or there's a tear in it or something. You see those companies that'll say, okay, well, we'll replace it, or they throw in something a little extra, and a nice personal note, something like that. And people are like, wow, what a great experience. I am a loyal customer,
even though they had a defective product. Right there, doesn't matter.
That there is brand, and it's the ability to go one step above. It's the ability to do things that are unexpected in a pleasant way, but it is how people interact with your organization, from people to like from people to paper or online to whatever it may be. It is the sort of combination of all of those things that sort of add up to what a brand is. And I think
like every single touch point that you have within a company
is the brand. It's the feeling. Like you think about things like, yes, like everyone recognizes the big brands like Coca-Cola and that sort of thing, but what's that feeling that you get at like over the holidays when you see like the polar bears holding a glass Coca-Cola bottle? It's nostalgia. It's whatever it may be. I think those are like big examples, but as an entrepreneur, it's okay, well, what you see with how we post about ourselves online, how we talk about our services, but then how I engage with you, whether it's over email, phone call, in person, that is all brand. And it takes a lot to really have that be so succinct.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you have to work on all the time because it changes depending on who your audience is, and understanding your customers and what they're looking for is a big part of that.
Yeah. Is it something that new entrepreneurs or business owners should spend a lot of time thinking about? Or should they just be like, you know what, I'm just going to be my authentic person, be my authentic self, and just try to, have good customer service. And then over time, that'll just kind of develop.
Depending on how early you are in your entrepreneurial process, I think there's a combination of things. Yes, like people will focus on the visual identity first because that is the first. That's like your front lobby. Like your how many times when I started out in working for a digital agency, like your website is your front lobby, and if user experience is not great, it's like going in and not having any doors inside or something like that. So I think that is important, but I do think authenticity is important as well. But depending on what your brand's purpose is, so what you're selling and what your service is might be different than what your personal brand is, and making sure you're consistent about representing the brand's values, how you present, as yourself versus the brand. Definitely like sort of a combination of things. Obviously great customer service and that sort of thing is great, but I think the key to it all is, understanding your customer base at a very deep level, because it's easy to say, okay, well, this is sort of what we're all about and this is what we're going to do. But if the type of clients that you have don't align with certain things, sometimes you might making like guesses about, well, this is what my customers want or what they're looking for, when that's actually not the case.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with a lot of clients in the past where they would say, well, this is what we want to do because this is what our clients want. But then you would do stakeholder interviews with, actual real clients, and they would give honest feedback, and you'd say, wow, I never thought of that, or didn't realize how important that was, and I wasn't giving that as much value. So having that sort of ability to sort of look at what people are looking for and what your sort of audience, is wanting, and then relaying that back into sort of what is your brand's value and purpose, and then how you execute on, services or the products. It's a whole cycle, and I think that's very important. You don't have to go like super into the weeds at the start, because you need to build up by understanding, as you sort of get that experience. But I think that's a really important thing to keep consistent as you grow.
Were you saying there just a few seconds ago that you were working with clients and they didn't even understand their customers enough, or they were trying to do things that were out of alignment with even their
like
customers?
I think
Because that's amazing for even big businesses to still get that stuff wrong.
It also takes a lot for a client to say, let's find out what we don't know, and let's find out what we think we know, but might not actually be what it is.
Yeah.
And so we would have clients where we would say, go through this process. And again, I would speak to sort of my mentor who was leading this, and she's now started her own business. I'd love to introduce you to her. She'd be great to have on the podcast. But it would say, okay, well, here are the things that sort of you think are important for your customers in their sort of decision-making process. Let's meet with people, stakeholders of your own business, your ideal sort of clients, existing clients, and maybe some other folks in the middle. And let's see what they're thinking, feeling, and doing as they're sort of going through their decision-making process, and find things that might align with us, things that we might need to tweak. And maybe there's new opportunities that are in there as well. And when you sort of take that, level of granularity and get in there, you find so much out about your brand that you didn't know, because it's easy to put out a survey and have people say, no, everything's great. But you really want to have those qualitative interviews to say, tell us the stuff that you think we don't want to hear. Tell us what we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Where did we mess up one time? And how can we fix that? Or what
What's
are
the
things
stuff
you
that
wish we did better?
The stuff that you complain about to your friends that you never tell.
Exactly.
Other
Like,
people.
you're not going to hurt our feelings. You're just going to make us get better, and then ultimately serve you better. So I think that's very important. And we had some clients who bought into that, and it paid dividends for them, because they were able to shift their strategy to focus on, their true client base. Because
you know what to say, because they just told you. They told
for
you
sure.
what they want. Yeah.
Because it's easy for a brand to say, we do this and we are going to be all things for everyone, but you can't be all things for everyone. And brands have seen that. They'll say, okay, well, we can do everything for everyone, but then certain people will say, well, this isn't for me still. And you're not tailoring it. Nothing can be super tailored, but there will be ways that you can have, sort of concurrent campaigns that speak to different groups within your customer base. And I think that's important.
So, but now you work at Humankind, which is a global recruitment company. Can you maybe just talk about the mission and the vision that you guys have there?
So Humankind is based out of Manchester, across the pond. And there's 3 of us here in Nova Scotia. The whole organization, our goal is, it's not just bums and seats, which, people will say like that, well, okay, you hear recruitment and, they're just looking to hire people. We consider ourselves a consultancy. So we consult with employers on, okay, well, your interview process. What are ways that you can tighten up that process and improve upon it in order to really get the most out of, the candidates that you're interviewing to find talent faster? Yes, there is the recruitment standpoint where our entire goal is understanding what our client's vision is, for what their needs are from a talent perspective, getting a deeper understanding from them of the type of people that they're looking to hire, the culture fit, getting to know them at a more intimate level, and then finding the best possible talent for them. And through that process, getting the right people in place in the shortest amount of time to hire, which is one of the most sort of critical pieces from a KPI standpoint for recruiters is, you don't want to be looking for people over 6 months. Like, how can we find people within 4 weeks or like under 6 weeks type of thing.
Especially if you're looking for top talent, because they're going to be in demand.
It is a really challenging time out there because you have so many variables. You have other recruiters that are looking. You have companies that are doing recruiting internally. You might have folks that are being approached by other companies while they're applying. So it is a very fast moving space. And so making sure that your process from start to finish is as buttoned up as possible, not just on the candidate, interviewing the candidates, as a recruiter and bringing them forward to your client, but also from the client side saying, once you sort of go through and start meeting with these people, how can we make that process as smooth and seamless as possible to make sure that we don't miss out on top talent by, not jumping on the right opportunity at the right time or being too slow, if that's the case.
Do you work then primarily with companies, and like, are your clients companies that want to hire people, or do you also work with individuals that are looking to just find work?
It's definitely a bit of both. So,
okay.
In our space, what Humankind focuses on is, companies that are in tech, in marketing, professional services. So if you're in like accounting and finance, those sort of roles, sales as well, and like customer service, those are really sort of our core, pillars that we look at. But what we do too is, and any recruitment agency, I assume would be, any of the good ones would be doing this, is making sure that your sort of like talent roster, you build up relationships with talent that you see out there that has, if tech, you look at developers. So who's working in C++ or who's working with skills, and, you keep track of where things are trending and get to know people, because you never know. Someone might be looking now, they might be looking 2 weeks from now, they might be looking 6 months from now, but you build up those connections because then when you find someone that would be a perfect fit for one of your clients, part of the way that our approach is with clients of having that more intimate relationship and understanding their needs, both from a team level, but as an organization level, is saying, okay, I know that there is someone here that I've met that would be a perfect fit for you. I know you're not hiring for them right now, but you really should meet with them and check them out. And that is taking that proactive approach to say, sometimes top talent isn't going to be applying, to a job posting. Top talent tends to move in more of these sort of like back channels. And that is sometimes how you find some of your best people.
Yeah. Is it true? I think I heard something somewhere. I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you'd have a better insight. Something like 80% of all jobs end up not actually being posted because it happens through like these back channel things, or people know people or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know if that's, I don't know about the statistic, but like, I definitely could see that happening, whether it's, by way of recruiter or, connections, because you do see a lot of people who will reach out and say, hey, network, is there anyone that I'm looking for these type of skills?
Right.
And some people will go about it that way. The challenge being, you still have to sift through a ton of different resumes, interview people, takes up a lot of time, takes up a lot of money. So depending on what you're looking for, that can be like a very exhaustive approach.
Yeah.
But it all depends. I think, what's surprising is most companies don't realize how much passive talent there is on LinkedIn. Folks that are...
What do you mean by passive
So
talent?
passive talent would be folks that are like, I'm not looking for a job immediately, but I'm definitely keeping my ears open. And, LinkedIn obviously has those features to say, I'm open, to opportunities, but I'm keeping that private so like recruiters can see that. You never truly realize how much talent is available when you're sort of in that hiring role, when you're only looking at folks that are applying, because you could be missing out on a huge amount of potential candidates if you go about it the right way.
This is a whole new world for me too, because even for me, I've never gone through LinkedIn or anything like that to find jobs. I've always kind of just, well, we were kind of talking about hockey a little earlier before we recorded, and I've made so many networks and connections through hockey. Like, I want to say like 50% of all my jobs have been through like, hey, I'm meeting a professor here, we're playing hockey. And then it's like, hey, come by to the office and then we'll set you up. And then career kind of takes off from there. So it was really interesting. You're saying something earlier about making sure you build those relationships with people, so that that if an opportunity comes up, you can match them correctly. And it seems that you guys are doing something that's completely different, is that you are really putting people first. You're getting to know people. It's not just numbers and spreadsheets and database. I mean, you probably have that stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, you're treating people as people and not just numbers. What is it about the work that you do that makes you do that stuff differently?
Well, if you think about it, like the recruitment space in general, like I've never worked in this space prior to this. I've had interactions with recruiters. Some of them have been great. Some of them, not so great. There is, sometimes people will have sort of like preconceived notions of what recruiters are like, and there's negative connotations to the word recruiter. We very much look to change that perception. And the idea is
negative from the people that are looking for work that don't like interacting with
recruiters? Could be both, to be honest, because there's times where there's examples where organizations might hire a recruiter, and it could be, a recruiter sort of scraping, depending on, could be an agency, could be an independent consultant, but they're scraping LinkedIn, finding people and just throwing a bunch of names and CVs at you, see what sticks. And if there's something in there that works out really well, they've done a great job, but you may have missed out on that ideal talent. And so a ton of time gets wasted in interviews, reviewing CVs. You might lose people along the way because that takes too long. Or you might have someone, I had someone reach out to me, and I'm sure you'd get a kick out of this because of your scientific background. They reached out to me and they said, hey, we see that you, are in BD. Would you have any experience running a lab? And I was like, a lab? No. Wow. Would you? Like, have you looked at my profile? Why are we chatting right now? So I think getting, to that more personal level of saying, okay, I want to understand the motivations of why someone's looking to, it's not just the motivations of why they're looking to hire and build out their team and their vision from the candidate standpoint as well, saying, I want to understand what your motivations are for leaving. Are you leaving for the right reasons, or like, is it because of one particular thing? Is it something that's being done in haste? Could there be something there that could be indicative of whether or not, you would stay at somewhere long term? There's so many different variables that you have to think of, and that's where the recruiters would go in and say, let me get to know you a little bit better, start to build a bit of a profile, and, really dive deep into the experience in order to say, okay, well, how can I then match you with the right organization, depending on what they're looking for, depending on the type of person that they want, depending on the culture fit, whatever that may be. It requires an extra level of due diligence.
I have this feeling that you probably really like the work that you're doing because you're getting to really understand these people and understanding what their needs and wants are, and finding those proper matches. So what is it like for you, like on a day-to-day basis, of making these connections and reaching out to these people?
I'm in sort of a unique role to the company, whereas I'm not doing any of the recruiting myself. We have recruiters here, and my goal is to build relationships within the community, both from a brand awareness standpoint to let people know who we are and what we're about and what it's like to work with us, but then also to find prospects and say, okay, well, let's have some conversations about what your needs are and what your challenges are. And if I can find someone that would be the right fit for us and us for them, then have I have the confidence built in with what our recruiters can do. I've seen it. They place people all over the world. We work in, I forget if it's like 13 or 15 different countries across the world. And the confidence that I have in the team is so high that I know that if I can bring in the right person that's the right fit for us and us be the right fit for them, I know they'll deliver.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fun stage for me, which is building our brand locally, and then proving ourselves. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to show people that we're confident because we know what we can do, and we can show you that as well.
In terms of thinking about a company that's going to come work for you, I guess you can even think of a company in general that's just looking to hire talent. What is it that they can do or that they need to do or to think about in order to make them as attractive as possible to be able to attract that top talent?
I will say one of the questions that comes up often, and this is just in sort of like networking and talking to people about this space, is, okay, well, how do I compete with people who can just flat out offer more money? Right. And how do I compete with that? And I think there's a few things, and those would be a combination of some long-term and short-term things that you can offer aside from salary that would be willing to sort of tip the scales for a candidate. Some of the long-term items would be sort of developing your culture, being able to say, okay, well, aside from building a great team, there's a ton of things that you can do in terms of offering a safe space for people to be able to give feedback. That can be a challenge for people at companies where they feel like they can't. Allowing people the runway to fail, learn from it, and do something to learn and apply it to sort of their next project, or, whether it's your benefits, whether it's your work-life balance when it comes to some companies will say, okay, we'll give a certain amount of days per year where you can do volunteer work, or if you want to work sort of 3 days in the office and 2 days from home, there's a combination of those things that you can put out there that will be helpful to say, okay, well, long term, this has a lot of weight for what I'm looking for. Short term, it's things like training. Training is things that cost-wise are lower to implement and very easy to get off the ground very quickly. So if you can say, we can invest in your training and get you up to speed, that way you can do different types of work and try different things and get on different projects. That's very important as well, because then you can say, here's something short-term that we can deliver, but then also you'll be part of this sort of long-term piece as well. And, some companies, it'll say, well, on Fridays, we have a beer keg that's, in our office. Some agency, I've had that, or fresh fruit that's brought in at the start of the week that everyone can have access to, or certain things that are, not one particular thing that's going to say, well, X salary versus fresh fruit on Mondays. It's here's a combination of all these things, plus some short-term things like, training, and sort of any flexibility that you can offer that could then be something that, you can take and say, well, this is where we can stack up. And I think more people are looking at the sort of intangible benefits compared to just flat out salary. Post-pandemic, it is a big factor. And you see it in some of the stats of, what you're seeing of candidates looking for jobs. Like, it's pretty high up on their sort of top 5 list of things that they're looking at. Salary is going to be up there, but flexibility, opportunity, and, vision is something to say, if you have a clear idea of what your vision is and why you're doing it, people can buy into that and say, okay, well, there's an opportunity for me to do something really cool here and develop my skills. And
is it something that people are trying to find more purpose in the work that they're doing, that they don't want to just have a job to just pay the bills, that they're looking for something that's going to give them
depends.
Like,
there's always going to be folks that are looking to take that next step in terms of, financial security. Absolutely. And to say that it's not a factor would be a lie.
Oh yeah.
We all do that. But there are things where if you have young kids, or, I spoke with someone last week who said, I can't offer you more money than some of these competitors, but what I can do is, in your time that you're here with me, I can make you into a way better, person in terms of these particular skills, a way better developer in this by the time you spend, whether it's a year or 3 years or 5 years with us. And you're going to be able to then leverage that to either move up within the company or, something, whatever it may be. So
Right.
it's
To
sort
use
of,
to get that salary that you're
yeah.
looking
So
for.
it's, you may not have the salary right away, but you might gain skills that could really position you well, future. So
Yeah.
it's short-term play versus long-term play and finding sort of where you fit.
There's got to be a balance there in terms of, if you're a business owner and you want to bring somebody on, you don't want to just train them up after 2 years and then just watch them constantly leave, because that's bad for you as well too, right? Because
Yeah.
you want people to stay. So how do you balance that, or how does a business balance I need to make this a really attractive place and they're going to learn lots of skills so that they can make more money, but not have go off to don't get poached by Google or what have you,
I think it depends on the organization. Like, there will be talent that, is not going to be there long term, and they help you either reach certain milestones, but they grow personally as well. And I think if you develop your culture internally and you are doing meaningful work, you're going to build a really strong team over time, and good people are going to leave, and that does happen. To say that people won't leave is, you can't say that, because they will. And it might not be because they don't like the place. They just have an opportunity to try something different.
Right. No, that's fair.
So I think it's recognizing that sometimes there's just a sort of a crossroads where people need to sort of try something different. And then there's other times where that can help you say, okay, well, we had a really great experience here. And hopefully it's not when they're leaving where you realize this, but you take some of the learnings and what you've done with them and apply it to some of your other team members and the rest of your team members or new hires, to say, here's how we really build up the team based on what worked really well for us. So, you don't want to have people get poached, but there will be people who will see an opportunity and jump at it. And you can't always fault them for that, but ideally you do the best you can to give them the best opportunity to learn, to do meaningful work, and work alongside colleagues that they enjoy working with and challenging each other on.
Like, I know Humankind has events that are happening, and they seem really, really cool. You showed me one earlier today. I was like, oh, this is really cool. Can't wait to go. But maybe you could just talk to me a little bit about what's coming up in the horizon for Humankind.
Absolutely. So a few things on the go. So we have an event that's coming up in September. It's our waterfront mixer. We're going to have, sort of business leaders from Halifax and, surrounding areas come out for a night where we have food, drink, entertainment, meet some good connections. It's a casual setting. We have some like custom swag that we've prepared for it as a little surprise. So by the time this goes out, we'll be pretty close to the event, I'm sure. And some other sort of fun things that'll happen at that night. But the idea is that it's a low pressure, come out, mingle with some folks. You might make some connections who are just in the room. We'll make some connections as well. We get to know each other in a way that isn't sort of forced and stuffy. It's like the networking event. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And so we're putting that on with a partner of ours, Nucleus, who's another company, a digital agency that works in transformation that is new to Nova Scotia as well. So you have two sort of brands new to Nova Scotia collaborating together to support one another. Again, it's that old school relationship. We don't necessarily have to, formalize something. We are going to have like something fun to announce while we're there, but it's something where it's that old school, let's help each other out. And if we can both succeed, that's great. We also have launched a series of speakeasy events, sort of like a smaller scale where, 30 to 40 people get together at, one of the bars here in Halifax, drinks and food provided by us and our partners. That's in partnership with PIB Insurance and Turtle Island Technology. Two really great individuals, Michael E. Bear and Gabrielle Dunnett. So same thing, three of us came together, similar sort of approach to building relationships. And we said, let's create an event that people are going to want to come to because it's not just a sell. And we had our first one. It was really great. We'll do some more in the coming months, encourage people to come out to them, have a good time and meet some people. And you never know, you might learn something. You might make a connection. But at the end of the day, we know you'll have a good time. So those are some of the events we have going on. We're also sponsoring the Tech Forward Awards, the Talent Champion Award. So that'll be in, I think it's November, through Digital Nova Scotia. And, there's a few other things that we're doing. Our event in September is going to support Feed Nova Scotia. We're going to match a donation of what we spend on food that night. We're going to donate to Feed Nova Scotia,
nice.
And so is Nucleus. and there's a few other organizations that we support over in the UK as well. So really events, getting to know people, build connections. I'd love to meet people for coffee. If people are reading this, or reading, if they're reading this podcast, if they're watching this podcast or listening to it, I don't drink hot beverages, but I'll have a cold water while someone drinks a coffee. It's really the conversation that I'm after, and would love to meet with people, even if it's just to sort of exchange thoughts and get to know one another.
And it's like we were saying earlier before, well, what you were saying is like, what's the worst that can happen when you go out and try to make those connections? And it's one thing that I'm finding, especially with doing this podcast, is the more connections you make and the more you engage with people and more you engage with your community, like the faster it is that you're going to grow. Like
for sure,
you got to get out of your own little bubble and get out to the world. And
networking is very much a long game. You meet with people, you develop relationships with them. They might introduce you to people, it kind of spreads, and you might say, okay, well, I introduced someone to someone, or I helped them out with something, or, maybe I lent them, some advice, or did a little bit of, work just to help them out. And 6 months later, they might come back and be like, hey, I have someone that wants to do work, and I've told them to come to you. It's understanding that things can pay off long-term by showing that your brand is trustworthy, that you are reliable, and that you are authentic. And if you can do that, networking, the right way and not just looking for things, giving, is a way to be able to say, people will say, oh, I know someone who does this, and I've sort of told them to reach out to you. And much like Josh, like Joshua is someone that I met a few times at a couple networking events. I was surprised that he, when you said, hey, he suggested I reach out to you, and I sent him a thank you, and really great guy. I think he's going to be one of the best sort of speakers in the circuit around locally, and hopefully he does it nationally as well. Really cool business that he has. But once again, like that's an example of someone that is doing something to help someone out, and I'm going to pay it forward.
That's a really good takeaway of what you just said there. If you're trying to network and you're trying to get yourself out there, just maybe not think about what you can extract from other people. Just think about what you can give. Just go out with the idea to help, be of service, be kind. People are naturally, they want to reciprocate from generosity. So it's like if you give something, they're going to just immediately almost want to give back, and even maybe give back more. So if you just have that philosophy of I'm just going to give the value that I can, maybe you don't have much value. Maybe it's like I could just maybe help you, teach the stuff that you know or what have you.
Yeah.
And then who knows what's going to happen down the line, right? Because that person's going to remember, it's like, oh, that person did me that solid favor. I'm going to come back and do something.
If I can put two people in a room that I know there's an opportunity, and this happened at DNS a lot. We would have a mixer, and I would say, hey, you need to get to know this person. And there's a story where two people met at one of our mixers, and it's been almost a year later. They've gone to a couple of trade conferences together in the States. They're about to do a bunch of work together. And like that was like a year of building that relationship between the two of them just because they met at an event. What a great story. And a great example of, the long game of networking. And that's a component for candidates to think of when they're trying to make themselves a bit more, stand out a bit more when they're looking to find work. But it's a really powerful one.
For those people that are looking for work, I mean, we on this podcast, we kind of tend to go towards entrepreneurs, but sometimes people are just looking they want to start a business, but they want to get some skills first. So it's a good idea to get a job and work with people. So if they're wanting to find a job with somebody that, they really want to work with, what could you tell them to focus on in order to give them the best chance of getting that job?
I think there's a few things that you can do sort of before the interview process. And there's a few things that I would say that you should do as part of the interview process or in prep of it. That would be helpful. So in advance of it, do your research, get, more than just surface level website stuff. Yes, LinkedIn makes you be a little bit of a creep when you check out someone's profile and do research, but people will recognize that you're putting in the effort, and that's important. So you could find things where you could say, oh, well, they have experience in this. I could ask them some questions about it. Ask people for a coffee, shoot that shot. Sometimes asking someone to pick their brain could be the best way to potentially introduce yourself to someone this is someone that's taking the initiative and they're curious. I'll give them the time. What's half an hour to grab a coffee and chat with someone that's looking for help. I think that's important. I think, taking any sort of like online like learning courses to show like, hey, I'm developing skills that go towards, what you're looking to do is important. And then I think there's a few others too. Like I met with someone the other day at one of our events, and they had said, like, yes, the surface level like research on our website, do a little bit more digging. But when we say, hey, do you have any questions? Ask a question. Come prepared with a question. If you have a little notebook, ask. You just be like, hey, like, do you mind if I take some notes as I go through this process? There's no reason why you can't do that, because it shows that you're someone who's actively listening, taking in that information, writing down things that could then sort of influence a question that you may have, so that you don't lose it. Asking the question of like any feedback when you're in an interview. It sounds weird to ask, in an interview when you're done, saying like, any other questions for us? Actually, one more, like, do you have any feedback on sort of, because then you can get some real-time feedback, and it sounds weird and people might not want to do it. But if you can get some good positive feedback at that moment, that's great. Or some things that you can learn, or like, hey, like anything, because usually if it's an HR manager, like they will probably be open to giving that to you.
I was going to be my questions, like, how open are they going to be to actually unveiling? Like, oh yeah, you answered these questions horribly. Like, this is garbage. Like, are they going to be maybe just a little bit nice in that?
They might not choose to answer the question, but there's no harm in asking. Your socials, if you could, I think personal brand is a big thing. So making sure if your socials are public, there's people will look at them. If
you have to be so careful with that these days, because I think I hear people online, they're like, oh, the second there's a candidate, I'm going on their Facebook, and if it's like party like all the time, it's like, okay, well,
and like you hear about it, it seems like the cliche thing that people talk about, but there are a lot of cases where it does come up. And I think the other thing too is, don't just apply to postings, because that is what people expect. You're gonna click apply through the LinkedIn apply, or on the posting on their website, you fill out the form, you attach your CV and cover letter. That's one way to do it. Find the person in the company. If you want to work at an agency, find that creative director and say, hey, I want to reach out to you. I see that there's a job posting. I'd love to pick your brain. See if you can make a connection. See if you can send a handwritten. How often do people get handwritten letters anymore? Just introducing yourself or something. I think
find that way to stand out.
What you can do to stand out there, and they're simple tactics, but very effective, because you could be just another name in a bunch of submissions that get captured in a form, or you could be that person that sent a letter, or reached out to a few people and showed that initiative. And if I'm willing to do the research and show the initiative, and really dig in versus just fill out the form, as a hiring manager, where does that kind of way, for you in your decision-making process, it might help tip the scales for sure.
And even if you fill out that form and you're like one of 2,000, some of these job applications, they get thousands of people that apply. Even if you are like the top candidate for it, you still have such a minute chance of actually getting that gig. I remember reading Chris Hadfield's book, and he was talking about his thing about how he wanted to become an astronaut and how he wanted to get into NASA. And he was like, I systematically thought of all the different things in every step of the process of how I could stand out, because even if I'm the best, I'm still 1 out of 10,000 or how many people apply. So he went through this whole process of all the things that he did to make himself stand out. And it worked, obviously. And
it doesn't have to be, like a prettied up resume. It could be the fact that you have your own site that shows, if you're a developer, that shows some of the work that you've done, or creative work if you're a creative, your own personal branding. If you are putting out content on LinkedIn that's, speaking to certain things, like that's definitely an extra level. But I think it's just, what are some different ways that I could stand out? And it's not necessarily showing up with your resume and a box of donuts. I think it would be, reaching out to the right person, showing that, okay, well, if I'm someone that is willing to go to these levels, not like, insane, levels, but like go to an extra level in order to say, I deserve an opportunity to show you why I would be the right fit, versus just submit and hope. I think that is the big thing. And network, ask for referrals. LinkedIn testimonials, if you have worked with people in the past and you had a good experience with them, I feel like no one uses those anymore. And I think it's such a really helpful tool to be able to say, hey, you don't have to say exactly what I want you to say, but can you just speak to what it was like working with me? Can you fill out a testimonial? Sometimes you'll get some really nice feedback and some feedback that you didn't expect, or spoke to something that you were like, oh, I didn't realize that made such an impact. That could be, you know, a difference maker at the end of the day.
Is that something that lives on LinkedIn itself? Like there's
it is, yeah. Like you have an opportunity to like send someone a request if it's a former colleague to say, hey, like I used to work with you. Would you mind filling that out? And I like asking someone, you know, here and there to do it if they had a positive experience. Companies don't do that enough to really promote their success and their wins. It's always like heads down, and, you know, maybe it's a Nova Scotia thing. I don't know. You know, there's some humbleness there, but there's nothing wrong if you do a good job or have left an impact on someone to say, do you mind putting it out there and vouching for me? Because sometimes that can really make a big difference in terms of, you know, your personal brand perception.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a Nova Scotia thing either, but you're right on the point. And it just, for me, even, I've never once asked anybody to leave like a testimonial or like, hey, could you just rate my podcast like a 5-star?
You absolutely should.
I have no ratings. I'm like, I need to start maybe just asking a few.
You should do that.
People. Like I'll ask you, like, did you have a good time?
I had a great time. This was a great time.
Could you give me
for all the people over there? This was a great experience, and 5 stars. But yeah, yes, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah. And that's the thing. You'll find people are happy to do that because as much as you're trying to find your success, I heard this thing. It was like on, I don't know, it was on CNN or something. I've become an old man when I drive. I love listening to the news. Yeah. I've become my dad. And there was a study where it was like, you know, those who give like a $5 bill to someone who's homeless, it's not the homeless person who feels really great about it. It's the person giving it, right?
Yeah.
And it's okay to be selfish in feeling that, you know, feeling great about doing that because it means you're still doing something nice. You can say, can you do a testimonial? And I'll say, oh, hey, I did it. And, you know, it makes me feel good helping you out, but it really does help you when you're, you know, sort of promoting the podcast.
Yeah. Absolutely
ask for referrals and for people to do testimonials. I think it's such a powerful tool that it just takes asking the question. And what's the worst that someone can say? Sorry, I don't feel comfortable doing it. No problem.
No problem. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And like it goes by, it should almost be the theme of this episode is just like shoot your shot. Cause it's like, hey, just
love it. I see that. I see that on the, you know, you always have like a little quote as like someone's like episode title, just shoot your shot. Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. Print it.
Greg, absolute pleasure talking with you today. Is there anything that we forgot to talk about that you want to mention today?
I don't think I do a lot of talking, so sometimes I kind of get lost in my own,
it was fantastic.
But this was a lot of fun. It was cool to be able to, I think for the first time, like take a real look back at sort of my whole experience since like pre-university. You know, talking about sort of what we've been able to do in honor of my brother, I think I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. And especially with what we're doing with Humankind, means a lot to be here. I'm excited to see you grow this podcast and your media company and achieve your goals. So being a part of that, I hope we can look back at this episode once you reach that goal and, you know, celebrate. So this has been fantastic. So if, you know, for anyone who wants to get in touch, I'll look into the camera again. If you want to chat about, you know, if you have a challenge when it comes to recruiting or want to get together and just sort of network, grab a coffee or a cold beverage, reach out to me on LinkedIn or Greg at Humankind. -recruitment.com.
We'll be sure to put all your contacts and whatever on the descriptions and all that.
I love the magic that happens afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. All the post-production team will take care of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Greg, thanks again so much.
Thank you
for the kind words. I really appreciate that. And we'll chat soon, I'm sure.